Hi everyone, this is Karen from the Historical Society of Montgomery County, PA. Today we are in Historic Montgomery Cemetery. It's October 2021, and in this month's video we're going to talk about a cold case from 1896. On September 27th, 1896, a milkman by the name of Bert Bartholomew was on his way to work in Norristown when he came across a body laying across the train tracks just south of the Seven Stars Hotel. The body was taken to the local undertaker in Plymouth Meeting, and his name was Charles Lewis. The undertaker, while examining the body, noticed there were marks and bruises, a cut on her nose, as well as a thumb and fingerprint around her neck, giving evidence that she had been strangled. They believed that she had been murdered elsewhere and was placed on the trolley tracks in hopes that they could get away with the murder, but the trolley had already gone through prior to whoever did it placing her body on the trolley tracks. The woman was identified as a Norristown native, Jane Dott. She was an unmarried mother of 3, and she was quite poor and lived near the intersection of Green and Wood Streets in Norristown. A few times other people had tried to get her to go to the almshouse, and she refused to go. Jane had last been seen on Saturday afternoon, September 27th, 1896, near Shaw's Old Furnace in Norristown, near the mouth of the Stony Creek. She was said to have been with her younger sister, Ella, Hannah Miller, William Mack, and a man named Peters. Ella was reportedly the one that had given Jane some baby clothes for her son, and those clothes had been found with Jane at the time of her death. Peters reportedly was engaged in a conversation with Jane when they were then met up by a man by the name of Erastus Jones of Conshohocken. Jane and Jones were then seen going down Lafayette Street, and shortly afterwards, Jones came back up the street with a severe cut on his forehead. An ambulance was then summoned, and they took him to Charity Hospital, where he received stitches and treatment for his wound. Jones claims that he was at Walnut and Lafayette Streets waiting for a train to pass when he was then struck in the head by a piece of wood that was sticking out from the train. When the police inspected this, however, it turns out that he had not been standing close enough to the tracks to actually have been hit by a passing train, so they believe that was when Jane had been attacked and then taken away by whoever eventually murdered her. The police brought Jones in for questioning, and he admitted he had been drinking at the time of the incident. Authorities believe that Jones was actually stabbed, and that was when Jane was also attacked and taken away. The police locked up Hannah Miller, Eileen Dotts, and they were considered to be witnesses in this case. Miller claimed that she never saw Jane again since they had met on Saturday. Eileen had reported that she had not seen her sister since 7:30 p.m. that evening as well. The police ultimately let the women go, not having enough evidence pointing them to Jane's murder. They turned their attention to a group of Italian men as the potential perpetrators, as it had been said that a group of 4 Italian men were on a wagon that had passed by the trolley tracks after the body had been put there, but they didn't see the body, or they claimed they didn't see the body. Eventually, they again could not get enough evidence to say that these four men had anything to do with it either. On the first day of the coroner's inquest, 14 witnesses were called, including Jane's father and her two sisters. The autopsy officially ruled her death as a murder. They had found evidence of strangulation and a fractured skull. The problem with this case is there were several reports of witnesses seeing Jane at two very different places around the same time. A man by the name of Richard Doran surfaced to testify, and he was suspected in wanting Jane to be out of the way on a case of larceny that he had committed, and Jane was allegedly a witness to this case. So he became the main subject of interest in Jane's murder. One of the witnesses, Thomas Shrunk, as well as Mrs. Zephyros, see Richard Doran with Jane Dotz at Green Street near Penn Street around 8:05 p.m. Saturday evening, the night she was murdered. However, Alice Lawrence reports having seen Jane around 8:30 p.m. near the Seven Stars Hotel, which was quite a ways away, and there wouldn't have been enough time for her to have gotten there that exact same night. To make matters even more confusing, Hannah Miller, Eileen Dotz, and William Mack testified that Jane was with them at Shaw's Furnace in Norristown at the exact same time. A young boy by the name of Eddie Johnson also states that he saw Jane pass through the Borough Market at 7:45 p.m. And just prior to that, another witness reported that she was at Mrs. Lemon's house where she lived at Green and Wood Streets. So ultimately, the police were very confused as to what exactly was the timeline leading up to Jane Dotz's murder, because there were too many conflicting reports as to where exactly she was throughout the night, and all reports were very far away from each other, and it would not have been physically possible for her to have been in every single place she was said to have been seen that night. On October 30th, 1896, Richard was officially arrested and accused of murdering Jane Dotz. Lizzie Priest, who had testified to having been living with Richard, recalls overhearing a conversation that Richard had, saying that he would kill Jane if he should do it in the stable. Lizzie also claims that she saw a clot of blood on a stick in the barn, as well as a number of burdock burrs. And this is important because when they found Jane's body, there were burdock burrs in her hair, which they claim they were not grown in the area, so that's why they thought the murder happened elsewhere. So this was very compelling to the prosecutors because this is the first evidence of somebody wanting to do harm to Jane, as well as the burdock burrs that were linked or connected to her hair, but were not grown in the area where her body was found. Richard was held in Montgomery County Prison in Norristown during the trial. He entered a plea of not guilty, and he was eventually found not guilty by the jury because, other than Lizzie's account that he wanted Jane out of the way, there was no actual evidence pointing to him. It was all hearsay, and with witnesses having Jane placed at too many different places throughout the area that night, they really weren't sure what the timeline was. In addition to that, they also never found a murder weapon, so again, Lizzie's claim that she saw a stick with a clot of blood in the barn at Richard's place was, again, no more than hearsay according to the jury because they never actually saw that weapon. So Richard was released, and what makes this case so interesting is shortly after he's released, we kind of lose track of him in the record. So he seems to have left town, and ultimately no one was ever formally charged for Jane's murder. Records indicate that Jane Dodds was buried here in Montgomery Cemetery. However, we have not found a headstone for her. So where exactly her body lies in the cemetery remains a mystery. We suspect she and her family were probably too poor for a marker, and that is probably why we don't know where exactly she's been buried.